the chat. So I just I'll lay out how the meeting will work tonight, and then I'll introduce a few folks that'll be speaking. So we're going to have just a brief introduction. Then we'll be moving over to the applicant to go through their proposal. We'll then have an open session of Q&A. So you'll raise your hand, use the raise hand function. I believe we've got that sorted here. I'm just trying to look for that. Yeah, you can. So if you click on reactions and then raise hand, or I think if you go over to the participants list, you can raise your hand. If you can't figure it out, let me know. And so we'll go through people based on when they've raised their hand and get hopefully all of the questions answered that way. We will be taking a few select questions as well in the chat. So if you've got questions that you want to write into the chat, we can take some of them, but most of them we'd actually prefer to have you ask the question directly to the applicant, and we're recording the meeting, so we'll have the record of it for after as well. So with me from my office is Miles Crowder. He's there from the Capital Ward office and usually handles the development files in our office, all of them, no matter where they are. Jonathan McLeod may also be here too, and there's John. He works on issues within the Dow's Lake area, Glebe area, and Glebe Annex area of Capital Ward. So obviously 3 communities surrounding this particular development. I'm not sure if Melanie from our office is on either, but Melanie does a bit of everything in our office. And I see Steve Gauthier there as well. Steve is the planner on the file, and somebody that's obviously been receiving lots of emails from you folks. This is obviously a very controversial development application, so we've been getting a lot of emails on it. And Steve will be the one triaging those and likely getting back to you as time goes on, and the main planner on the file. I may actually go to Steve as well before we go to the applicant, just to see if there's a timeline or anything else he wants to add before we go to the applicant. I do see the applicant on here as well. I'm not sure if it's going to be Foten giving the presentation or the owners of the property, but I'll turn to them after we go to Steve. So, and obviously, of course, lots of community members that are very engaged here. Nice to see presidents of community associations here, lots of community figures that I recognize. I won't name you all, but I see you there. Thank you for being here and all of your activity on this file and others. All right, so Steve, did you want to start us off to see if there's anything else to add on process, timelines, anything else you wanted to add before we turn it over?
Just in terms of timelines, the circulation period will end August 28th, so I would encourage people to send me comments. That being said, if some comments are late, that's not a problem. But the more you wait, the less likely that the comments will be part of the consolidated list. So I would encourage people after this meeting to try to provide me with their comments, let's say within next week.
Steve, you mentioned August 28th. Did you mean October or?
I'm so sorry. I'm at September 28th.
Okay. September 28th. Okay. So obviously getting comments in is important. We've had a lot so far, but the more, the better. And Steve, is there a timeline besides that you wanted to mention, or?
Well, for now, I cannot really give you a date for a planning committee because we will be collecting comments. Staff hasn't yet provided their position on the proposal, and from there, as we will discuss and as the adjustment will be made to the proposal, that's where we'll be in a better position to determine a tentative date for planning committee. So there's no date yet that has been established.
Okay, that is helpful. If folks feel a need to extend that September 28th deadline for comments, and we're still getting a lot up to that date, we can always request that, but let me know how you feel around that time. So I think with that, I will turn it over to the applicant to go through a presentation of the proposal, and then after that, we'll start to take questions right away. So I want to make sure we get to a lot of folks' questions. So I'm not sure if it's Roberto going through the presentation or somebody else. I'm not sure.
I'll start off, Councilor.
Okay, Paul.
Yeah, Roberto and I'll
Okay.
both take a turn. So yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Black. I'm an associate at Foten Plan and Design. I recognize some of you who we've had some conversations about this file with previously, and others who I don't recognize, but happy to have you all here tonight to discuss this proposal and hear your thoughts about it, hopefully answer questions that you might have about it, and then yeah, take your feedback back as part of the circulation process. With me tonight is Tanya Chowry from Kataza Group, who is the developer on the file and our client. She'll be here to answer any questions that are ownership sort of questions. We also have Roberto Campos from Figure Architects. He's a project architect. And Andrew Hart from CGH Transportation, who is our transportation consultant. So we'll do our best to answer questions that you might have if there are things that we don't have answers for tonight, but we can follow up with the counselor's office and try and get those answers to you going forward for sure. Just wondering, Counselor, if I'm able to share a presentation.
Yes, we'll give you that capability. Just 1 minute.
Thanks. Thank you.
Should be good now.
So we're actually talking about 3 parcels of land, which are familiar, I know, to many of you, as they've been the subject of different development proposals over the past many years. Separately though, but now the 3 parcels are together as one proposal for tonight. So just in terms of the status, I mean, Steve touched on a little bit of this, but we have submitted for a zoning bylaw amendment and site plan control application. I'll speak to what the zoning bylaw amendment covers in a few minutes, but the site plan control application is sort of the more detailed design discussion around the building, what the building itself looks like in terms of materials and that sort of thing, and also landscaping and site design, streetscaping, that sort of thing. So we submitted both those applications. Typically they run concurrently, but the zoning bylaw amendment would proceed to planning committee before any site plan control application is approved. We recently, in early September, had a second review with the Urban Design Review Panel of the city, which is an advisory panel for Steve and the planning department on architecture and design. So we had done a pre-submission consult with them as well, and incorporated some of their feedback in this initial submission, but then we did a secondary review and got some additional feedback. So we got some verbal feedback and expect written feedback in the next few weeks. And then as Steve mentioned, the commenting period is ongoing, and we expect comments from staff in early October. And then all those comments from the UDRP, from city staff, from yourselves tonight, and those that you submit through Councillor Menard's office or to Steve directly, we'll take back, we'll look at how we can mitigate concerns with regards to the proposal, and we'll work to resubmit materials back to Steve, which will then be circulated again. In terms of the site context, you're all fairly familiar, I'm sure, with it, but the southwest corner of Bronson Avenue and Carling Avenue, 2 arterial roads, important arterial roads in the city for sure. Well connected to bike trails along the canal, obviously, and throughout the glebe, but also through the glebe into the downtown core along the different O'Connor Street bikeway to the east and Percy Street bikeway as well. There's a fair bit of development happening in the area. This just summarizes a few of the recent applications or approvals that have gone through, but it is an active area, obviously. The site's across from Glebe Collegiate and from the football field on the east side of Bronson Avenue. And it is sort of an L-shaped property. So it does include both 770 Bronson, which is right on the corner, as well as 774 Bronson and 557 Cambridge, which is the through lot between Bronson and Cambridge. And as I mentioned, both of those have been subject of previous applications separately. And this proposal would consolidate the properties into one. In terms of just quick policy overview before Roberto jumps into the building design. So Carling Avenue is an arterial main street in the city's official plan. Arterial main streets are target areas for intensification within the city, meaning they're intended to obviously intensify given their function. So given that obviously they move vehicles, a lot of vehicles, but they're also focus of transit throughout the city, generally transit priority corridors. And in the case of Carling Avenue, a future LRT to the west of here. So west of Carling Station today. Generally, building heights on arterial main streets are up to 9 stories, but at specific nodes, the official plan contemplates building heights over 10 stories, which the city defines as high-rise buildings. So one such node is identified is directly butting the intersection of a main street, of the arterial main street with another main street, or with a transit priority corridor, which is identified on Schedule D of the official plan. And in that case, a high-rise building may be permitted with a community amenity as well. So this is Schedule D of the official plan, which is the city's rapid transit network. You can see the subject property identified at this corner here of Carling and Bronson. So Carling Avenue, as I mentioned, east of Carling Station is a transit priority corridor with isolated measures, as is Bronson Avenue, north and south, a transit priority corridor. So the site satisfies the nodal criteria for consideration of a high-rise building. The Carling Light Rail Station, obviously closed right now, but reopening as part of the expanded Trillium line, is approximately 850 meters west of the site, straight down Carling Avenue. In terms of the zoning on the sites today, so it does have 2 separate zones. The 770 Bronson on the corner is zoned AM10 with a special exception 2373. That exception was based on the previous proposal for the site. And then 774 and 557 is in the AM1 subzone with exception 2003 and a schedule which addresses building height and setbacks, again, based on the previous proposal for the lands. So we're seeking to rezone the lands as one parcel with an AM10 zone. AM10 is a subzone within the city that contains special provisions regarding transparency and glazing adjacent to the arterial main street, as well as a minimum required for building frontage along that arterial main street. So it's intended to be more urban and active main streets. So it applies along much of Carling Avenue. The zoning amendment also seeks to address a couple of performance standards, so interior and corner side yard setbacks, as well as building height and the permission for stacked bike parking, which actually was recently adopted by the city as an update to their zoning bylaw amendment to permit stacked bike parking. But we've also just requested as part of this amendment just to be certain that it's would be permitted. One of the comments that we've heard a little bit from UDRP and from some of our preliminary conversations is a concern about the proximity of the tower, which, as you'll see, is proposed in this general location to these properties here. And so the city has urban design guidelines for high-rise buildings. Specifically, it addresses the design of the buildings, angular planes to transition to low-rise, but also the size of properties that would be appropriate for high-rise buildings. So we've looked at these 2 properties, 280 and 270 Carling, and neither property on its own would meet the size requirements for a high-rise building. So the city has a minimum area of over 1,300 square meters for consideration of a high-rise building. And then also So if we assume, though, that they would be someday consolidated and a high-rise building built on it, we've also looked at that. In our opinion, we would cite a high-rise building in this location, in this sort of northwest corner of the site. We just think that makes sense from a site layout perspective, not that we're designing that site, but just trying to think through the separation between a future tower if it were permitted. I will say the current policies for 270 and 280 do not permit a high-rise building. As I noted, the arterial Main Street policies specify that it needs to be at the intersection of the arterial Main Street and the transit priority corridor. But the new official plan does contemplate potentially high-rise buildings other places along Main Street. So that's why we wanted to look at this more carefully. Our tower is proposed with about a 7-meter setback currently from this property line. And that is based on the fact that we don't believe that this site will develop with a high-rise building, and or that if it were to develop with a high-rise building, it would be in this northwest corner. We heard comments from the UDRP to reinvestigate that setback and see what could be done about that. So we are going to study that. We're going to take that away and study it. But for now, this has been our analysis to date on these two properties and the proximity of the tower. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Roberto and allow him to walk you through the design of the building.
Great. Thanks, Paul. My name is Roberto Campos. I'm a partner with Figure Architects. I likely presented to many of you, I think actually about a year or so ago when we had our first go around. And so we certainly took some comments. As Paul said, we've now been to the UDRP twice, one informally, one formally, and certainly have gotten comments back and forth there that we've tried to incorporate into this proposal as best we can. I think, as Paul mentioned, one of them is certainly the setback and the width of the tower itself. What I'll do quickly is I'll just kind of go over the overall project proposal itself. What is being proposed is a 2-phase development. Phase 1, which you see running along Bronson and the intersection itself, would include up to a 9-story mid-rise section that would be supporting primarily student housing or cater towards students. And then a tower up to 26 stories above from 10 up that would be more of a traditional apartment building complex. The ground floor that you see here is made up primarily of amenity spaces. As much as we can. This was very much about the client wanting to provide ample amenity requirements for both the student programming as well as the general tenancy of this project, and also the future phase 2. Phase 2 of the project, which would be fronting off at Cambridge Street, is a tiered mid-rise building that goes from 4 along Main Street and then setbacks to a 9-story project that ultimately connects somewhat to the phase 1 project. Both of these projects would be sitting on a 2-level underground parking garage. Access to the garage in and out is on Bronson. That is the main access for vehicular and is the only one into the parking garage. We do have a secondary exit that will have a right out of there only onto Cambridge and then onto Carling Avenue. We do have a small support lane on the north side of the site that will provide access to a small move-in room, as well as any kind of deliveries, drop-offs, that kind of stuff. So it's that would be the only aspect of use for it. So it's really only used for move-in or any kind of delivery. So not a very heavily used lane. It'll also be used for access to the access from the back for bicycle lane, for bicycle traffic and pedestrian coming in from the west side of the property. two major points that we had taken on to try to resolve that as we were developing this project is obviously some of the setbacks, one along Bronson Avenue and the mass that we was originally proposed about a year or so ago. And then number two is obviously the scale of the tower, location of the tower in relationship to the adjacent properties, as Paul said. Can we go to the next slide, maybe? Yeah, so this is the proposal. In our initial proposal for the project, there was a continuous 9-story podium from ground right up. What we've done now is set back the fifth floor of the project just shy of 2 meters. And then ultimately what we've also removed is a significant portion of the southeast corner of the property. I don't know if you can just point to that, Paul. Exactly right up there to create another transition point. It's going to, right now it's being proposed as a small outdoor amenity space accessed by the students. Another major aspect that we've done obviously is to look at the setback between the west property for the tower separation. In the initial proposal, we were, I believe, a little bit over 3.3 meters in setback. We've now increased that just shy of 7. As Paul mentioned, we're also trying to look to see if we can increase that a little bit as well. Again, under the notion that we don't believe that the adjacent property as individual properties can't support towers, even if it was allowed. They're just too small to make them work as towers. However, if, as Paul mentioned, if they're ever assembled as a single property, I think it would be very prudent that they would likely put their tower location or anything of height on the western portion of that property against Cambridge Avenue. So which is why we feel that that we're not really too concerned necessarily of a future tower and providing that sense of separation. As you can see here in this image, the idea of the ground floor is primarily open as part of the arterial Main Street zoning requirements. We have a 4.5 meter ground floor with a significant amount of clear glass to provide an active experience at the pedestrian level. Our actual building is actually set back further than the property along Bronson Avenue, and part of that is to create a much more engaging pedestrian space at that ground floor. We are providing a small, coffee shop on the western side of the intersection, which would be right in that area there, which would really be provided by the landlord or owner of the building. I know there's been discussions about whether we can try to get in retail onto the ground floor. It's a bit of a chicken and egg kind of scenario. We can, it's certainly able to support it. The challenge with it is that we can leave it for commercial space, but unfortunately, because of the way Bronson is just designed as a street, it's just not a very car parking access space. So you have difficulty trying to get that rented to anybody. So you end up with a lot of for lease signs. I think the client is more than willing, and as Bronson develops over the years, that if demand is there for commercial retail, that it's certainly designed to be able to support it if ever needed. Can you go to the next image? This is a view from the football field at Glebe Collegiate. As you can see, we've tried to really push on those transitions at the 4th floor and then up at the 7th floor to create some relief and some setback conditions on the facade before we transition to the high rise. It was very important for us to try to look at materiality at those lower levels. So we're using masonry as our primary material with infill panels, either that will be metal or a cement board panel. Next image. This is a bird's eye, again, looking west. As you can see, also the intersection was very important to us to try to create as Paul said, something that is about a node at this intersection of the city. I live on Flora, so not very far from here. I know it quite well. And so it's and has seen that the black fence really be the dominant feature over the last few years. And so the idea of trying to create a much more engaging intersection, we've set back the 5th floor to the 9th floor on a different angle than the ground floor to the 4th in order to create that podium experience at that intersection. And then again, trying to play with the volumetric at the tower. Next. Again, looking west again, you can see the access to the parking. Again, next. So this is now looking kind of southeast from Cambridge. You can see the transitions that we're showing at the Cambridge entrance. One of the comments that we did receive from UDRP was whether we can see if we can actually lower the building on the Cambridge side so that the 2nd floor of the Cambridge side building would actually line up with the ground floor of the phase 1. And part of that is right now they don't line up perfectly as the floors go up. And that's primarily due to the zoning, is that the phase 1 is on an arterial main street, which would require a minimum 4.5 meter ground floor, where the Cambridge side, there's no commercial, there's none of that. So it doesn't make sense to have a 4.5 meter ground floor. It just doesn't make for very nice units. It actually becomes very cavernous. The problem with that is then you end up with around 1.5 meters difference as the building goes up. And so what we're going to try to do is see if we can actually pick that up by actually lowering phase 2, which we're kind of looking at right now. It really is about the challenge of parking. The site does drop between Bronson and Cambridge of about a little over 1.5 meters. And so that's something that we're looking at right now to make sure that we can actually make it work based on how it works in the parking. If we can do it, but then we'll certainly be exploring that very seriously. Yeah, this is the view looking south on directly in front of the current office building that's at the northwest corner. As you can see, we really tried to emphasize that 4 floors of podium and the clear glass at the intersection before we step up to the mid-rise and then the high-rise. Can you go next? View from Cambridge. Again, a big, you can see here that we've taken significant setbacks. Our building, in comparison actually to the initial proposal, not the proposal we did, but the one that was submitted before, we're actually about 6 meters further back from the street than the initial proposal. And then on top of that, we're another, which also includes stepping back another 6 meters on the upper 5th to 9th floor of the phase 2 section. Again, if part of that, what you're seeing, that wall where the address is the actual parking structure that is there. And so again, one of the things that we're going to try to see is if we can lower that another 1.5 meters to try to have a bit of a more direct access onto this phase 2 section of the site. Next. Can we switch slides? Right. Oh.
Sorry, it's just lagging, sorry.
Oh, that's all right. Again, quick view, just view of the intersection. Next. Bit of a lag, sorry. Yeah. Lock up on you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Bob, I see you have your hand up there. We're going to take questions at the end, but given the little hiccup here, do you have a quick question or is it a longer one?
Oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Bob. maybe we'll continue for now, and then at the end, Bob,
Sure.
you'll be first up, Bob. So, yeah. Okay.
So
thanks very much.
What we've added here is a few more drawings that kind of just highlight the angular plane requirements as required by the high building guideline. As you can see here, based on this requirement, the building actually misses it entirely and is actually staying within the actual angular plane. You can see even at the 4, and then as it transitions to 9, and then as it transitions up to the tower at the intersection, we're missing that. Next slide. We'll show it from the others. Oh, yeah. Okay. So anyway, so here's some additional shadow studies that we did. This is we combined March and September. The equinox dates, they tend to be almost identical with regards to the shadows. And so we've taken them at 8, 10, noon, 2, 4, and 5:30. You could see that at 8 a.m. There is a bit of shadow as it grows over west onto over Carling. There is a new building that is about to start construction fairly soon across the street on Carling, which is, I believe, slated to be 16 stories. So that really is going to provide more of the impact into that northwest neighborhood. As you can see, at 10 o'clock, it starts to rotate clockwise. By noon, it's pretty much over the intersection. 2 o'clock, again, kitty corner, and then 4 over the football field. By 5:30, March, September, as you're starting to notice now, it's starting to get dark, with us hitting basically almost nighttime at around 7, a little after 7 o'clock now. So into June, obviously the highest sun days over Carling, still over Carling at 10, just into the intersection at noon, just touching the football field at 2, over the football field at 4, and then starting to get into the neighborhood at 5:30. December, obviously shadows are much longer. 8 a.m. it's still kind of getting dark. The sun is just starting to creep over. 10 a.m. you're starting to see the long shadows. Noon, over Carling towards the north, again northeast at 2. By around 4 o'clock we're pretty close to getting dark. I know that by 5 o'clock it's pretty dark nighttime in December. So some sections, again you can see the red, and this is, you can see where the cut line is in that little image in the top left corner, that we're cutting through the phase 1 and phase 2. The red kind of identifies what the initial proposal before this one actually has zoned, which is the red kind of highlighted areas, so up to 12 stories, I believe. And so you could see that we're, even on Cambridge, we're set back a full grid bay, 6 meters, and then again another grid bay. So we're close to 19 meters from the property line. It's, well, because the angle, the property angles there, it's between 16 and 19 meters along grid line 3. And then so we're staying just shy of the max height on that side. And then as it hits closer to Bronson, we're actually three stories lower. We've added at the 4th floor along Bronson, a 1.8 meter setback before it hits the 5th floor. And then this is cutting it through where that kind of amenity space is at the 7th floor. Next section. This is a typical section that we had shown for the tower looking south. And next section. I think, was this the last one? Oh, these are just elevations. So some of the elevations, again, looking at materiality and the gridding, color palettes that we felt were, again, trying to use the masonry as a big component to this, at those low and mid-rise sections of the project. Here you can see the differences in height as it gets to the 2nd floor. And again, if we can lower it, if we can make the garage work, then we'll certainly look at lowering that phase 2 section to line up with, so that the floors line up from the 2nd to the, this is looking east on the Cambridge side.
think
That's
all.
probably it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, thanks for that, Roberto and Paul. Appreciate you walking through that, and a couple of things you mentioned with the UDRP response. There's a lot of remaining concerns we're getting, and I'm sure you'll hear them tonight. And I think the piece with this application is we want to make sure we can find some common ground, because as it stands right now, I know there's too many concerns in the community for this one to just move forward as is. So we're going to try to find some common ground on this. So I think, Bob, you're up first. Are you able to unmute?
I am. Now
Okay, great.
Now I am. I found the unmute button. So I mean, first of all, I think it's quite interesting. We were looking at the plans that you had a year ago, and so you've made some changes, and that's appreciated. But I think that this is still, the concern is the mass and the height. And it's just too big for the site from our sense, our reading of this. It's too big for the site, it's too big for the community. And we can understand how you could do 9 stories. You know, 9 stories is what's allowed by the current planning requirements, and we can see how that fits. But we can't see how you can justify 26 stories. So what justification do you have for that? You've said that, you know, we're on a corner of 2 main streets. This allows you to consider going beyond the stated limits. But why do you have to go to 26 stories? It just doesn't seem to fit. It's out of character with the space you're introducing as you go south on Bronson, as you go west on Carling. It doesn't introduce our community in any sensible way. I mean, it's a low-rise community. So maybe you'd like to address that.
Hey.
Yeah, sure. I can jump in, Councillor, and then Roberto, feel free to add. But yeah, you're right. So the policy is the first step that we look at the policy. It's an identified node within the city where the city has targeted for potential high-rise buildings. So that's anything over 10 stories up to generally 30 stories in the city of Ottawa is high-rise, and then there's a separate category for 30 plus or 31 plus. So we look at that first, and then we say, okay, we can contemplate a high-rise building here. Then we look at the city's directions for high-rise buildings, which they have the urban design guidelines for high-rise buildings. So some of those things we've seen tonight, the angular plane, the size of the properties, the separation between high-rise buildings, those sorts of things. And we look at can we achieve a high-rise building here while providing decent transition to adjacent communities. At the same time, we also look at what's the planned function of the corridors that we're talking about. So Carling Avenue, for instance, is a Main Street corridor, right? So we know that the current policies of the official plan would support generally up to 9 stories along that corridor.
On the other side of the street.
On both sides of Carling is an arterial Main Street.
Not the zoning through our community on the south side.
Right, you're right. The zoning today is R4 west of Cambridge, right adjacent to Carling. You're right. But if we look at the official plan context, it would suggest that you could do arterial Main Street. But you're right. Today it's R4, so low-rise apartments generally along that strip of Carling. And so we look at the context and we look at the transition, and we determine what we think makes sense. Obviously, there are a variety of other factors that go into any development, economics being one of them. But the first things that we look at, we being Fotan and Roberto, are those things, the policy, the context, and how a building would fit into the community. I understand that obviously to the southwest is low rise, to the east is low rise neighborhoods, to the northwest is generally low rise, a little bit more mixed maybe. But the city's policies aim to protect those areas, and then how they protect those areas is by pushing intensification onto the edges of those communities, so along these arterial roadways. And that's why arterial main streets and traditional main streets are our target areas for intensification, because they're seeking to protect the low-rise neighborhood character.
I don't see how this protects, I mean, this is right in the middle of our community. I mean, we've got, got Glebe Addicts, Glebe and Dow's Lake residents. It's all part of Glebe, and it's right in the middle, and you're putting this giant thing. It's sort of like Colonel Bly Towers built in 1959. It was just an atrocious planning issue, and this is going to have the same characteristic. My opinion. Okay,
thank you, Bob, for that. For that important question, because we are getting a lot of comments from people in the community about the height specifically. So appreciate you raising that off the bat. Duncan Altz, you're up.
Thanks, and thanks to Bob for leading us off, because I think probably the reaction of a lot of us, even those of us who have spent a lot of time looking through the application materials and trying to get up to speed on this, when we see it in 3D, so to speak, from FOTEN, it is a massive development. It is startling. It is jarring to the eye, even to see it here. And it's interesting, FOTEN says that they look at the context and they want to make an adequate transition from community to building, but it seems like absolutely no adequate transition is being made here at all. FOTEN says that they look at the policies and they try to find the exceptions where they can squeeze in these big buildings. But what the Planning Act and the policies and regulations promulgated under the Planning Act call for is an adequate transition and to be done in the public interest. And so as FOTEN acknowledged, and as Bob pointed out, the Dow's Lake community is small homes built predominantly between 1935 and 1950, story and a half, 2 stories. They are modestly sized. And then at the top of Cambridge, which is already situated at the top of a hill, you have this mass of concrete. If we could go back to slide 23, I'm not sure if we have that capacity, but we see just these minuscule grids going back and forth, and the building goes up with each grid, or at every other grid, at every other 3 or 4 meter setback. And it's just another mass of concrete situated at the top of a hill, on a building that is occupying the entirety of this massive lot from Cambridge, looking all the way up to Bronson and then over to Carling. And so my question to you is, what other steps could be made? What better steps could be made, in your expert opinion, to make for a better transition from the neighborhood into this building? And I ask that specifically with regard from Cambridge looking towards Bronson. It's such a key area, because it is where people come to enjoy the Tulip Festival, to enjoy Winterlude. It is a focal point of the city, and this mass of building just plunked down really does not seem to be measuring up in any way. So again, my question is, what better efforts could be made to create a transition between the community, the area, and that building?
Good question. The UDRP also did raise the massing and transition at that spot as well. I know there's been some changes, but yeah, Roberto or Paul, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, like I think we've certainly tried to look at that specifically. I think we've actually done a better job than the past proposal in that aspect, especially off of Cambridge. The height in this case is predominantly obviously at Carling and Bronson, but the section between Cambridge towards Bronson is actually smaller than what was actually approved in the initial proposal before. So we're actually lower by 3 floors. We're set back another 6 meters. along on the lower 4 floors, and then an additional 6 meters on the upper floor. So I think that, I think there was some effort I do think there is an honest effort to try to make that transition even better than it was originally approved. But we certainly take your point. Like we said, we're gonna even look at how we can lower that phase 2 even more. We're here to obviously hear you out. We went to informal review to try to get opinions there. We welcome these conversations. I know we're going to certainly regroup as a team to make sure that we look at what is being discussed here, and as Sean say, Councilor Menard said, how do we find common ground? So we certainly are here to take your comments. We take them very serious. I think like we said, we've already started by looking at those previous proposals and actually create better transitions from Cambridge up, because it is much better than it was in the initially approved proposal. But we're going to continuously look at this and make sure that we find common ground.
I certainly hope that improvement can be made, and that the standard that is used is not what was initially a substandard proposal, but what is really architecturally and from a design perspective what is best, or at least minimally acceptable. Because I don't think with all due respect and deference to your expertise, I don't think we're there yet.
Okay, thank you for that, Duncan. Good questions. Next up, I believe that's Alan Freeman there, who's, I believe I got that right, whose article I just read on the Civic Hospital. Excellent article, by the way, not too long ago. Thank you for that. Alan, you're up.
Okay, I heard just in previous comments something about context and something about public interest. And I think it's really important for us to understand who the applicant is. I don't know if you've been reading the newspapers recently, but if you read the Globe and Mail, La Presse, the Montreal Gazette, there has been a coroner's inquiry that's been going on for several weeks now into the deaths at the Heron residential home in Dorval, Quebec in April of 2020, at the start of the pandemic. The owner of that residence, where 47 people died, was Catasa. Catasa, from what I understand, is the applicant, right? Catasa is every day you can read about the horrific conditions at that home, which has now been closed by Catasa. The people who died of dehydration, of starvation in their own soil. This is a company which has a long record. In March of this year, a class action suit for 500 was settled, involving the residents and their survivors for $5.5 million. More recently, I think there was a government report which described the organizational negligence at the running of this home, okay? It seems as if Catasa, which has been very much involved in the old age nursing home business, is pivoting, I guess. It's now recently sold 2 other homes in Quebec, now seems to be crossing the river and deciding to go into residential real estate, okay? So I think it's important for us to understand who we're dealing with. And when we ask, we're dealing with the public interest, we're asking for, basically, we have an applicant that's asking for a derogation from the rules, right? Why? Can we trust these people? What sort of track record do they have? I am particularly upset because it seems as if across the street on Carling, they're going to be operating a home, I understand, a seniors residence for over 55s. I don't think it's a nursing home, but considering the track record, this is all very disturbing. And I would think that the city, have they done due diligence on who this operator is? And as a community, should we welcome them into our midst?
Thank you. Thank you, Alan, and Tanya. You can feel free to respond. Absolutely. And just so you know, Alan, we did send the materials you sent us as well to city staff. So Tanya, go ahead and respond if you'd like.
I'm concerned for Heron. It's an ongoing investigation, and honestly, one has nothing to do with the other. And we are not, it's a bigger issue than just, it was at the beginning of the pandemic. I don't need to elaborate more on this. Like, as I said, it's still ongoing investigation by the coroner. You could, if you want, you can keep track on it online. You'll see that we are not held criminally responsible for anything. We're not negligent. The coroner is currently finishing its investigation. So more on that. Concerning our history, we've been 35 years in business, not only in the seniors care, but within residential. We own over 3,000 units, so 3,000 homes, whether it's apartments, mobile homes, senior retirement homes. And unfortunately, the situation has happened. We are very sad, and there's not more to say about that. If you have questions about our history in business, I'm more than welcome to, if you want to come see some of our other retirement home here, there's visits currently being done, and our homes are currently full. The residents are fully happy. Concerning the lot on 265 Carling, that one will be 55 plus. It'll be independent living. It's not CHSLD. It's not care. We are a reliable company. Like I told you, we've been in business for 35 years, and an unfortunate situation has happened, and we're very sad about it. But if you have initial questions or comments, I'm more than happy to answer anything you guys have.
Alan, any follow-up about the application or otherwise?
We don't have, we about the application. Well, I mean, I think that, I think it's, first of all, on the history of Katasa, just Google it, okay? And I think you'll find out lots, probably too much that you ever want to hear about this organization, and also about the you know, some of the background of the owners. The other thing that one thing I think that about this particular development is, does anybody who's ever involved in this planning ever been on Bronson Avenue during daylight hours? It's not a traditional main street. It's something out of, you know, some sort of urban hell. There is no pedestrian in their right mind who will walk down the sidewalks of that street. It's completely overrun as it is. Additional housing on that street will just eventually lead to some sort of breaking point. So I cannot believe that the city would be considering any sort of a development of this size and scale on that site. It's really unbelievable.
I appreciate your comments about that, Alan. I agree with you. Bronson is absolutely terrible. It's in need of a full remodeling. There is supposed to be one. It's been pushed back a bit because of the MTO work that is going on. We've held some consultations already on Bronson itself, but I agree. We have to be careful about what we're allowing to be built there when we know how dangerous it is as it stands.
And it's almost 1 kilometer from the you know, the LRT. Everybody comes there by car or by bus, perhaps. It's not a mass transit area at all.
No, it is a traffic sewer. You were absolutely right about that. So I appreciate those comments. Thank you. Jag, I see you're up next.
Okay, thank you. I've been listening to this with great interest. I have a quick question, first of all. The second level of that development has got like a diagonal wall, kind of a triangular thing. It's kind of funky looking. Can you tell me the specific purpose of that? Is it aesthetic, or does it have a function?
Sorry, can we
Maybe
just
you want
bring
to,
it, yeah, bring it
Roberto,
up?
yeah, maybe you want to bring that up. Is that what you were just saying?
Yeah, if
Okay.
you can bring it up. Sorry, just so I know exactly what to comment on. Sorry. Paul, can you bring it up?
Paul, are you still got powers there to bring it up?
Yeah, so the diagonals on that center section from the 5th to the 9th floor or whatever it is, yeah.
Yeah.
On the northwest side, there's 2 diagonal walls. What is the specific purpose of that?
We just wanted to create visual interest at the intersection. The ground floor up to the 4th floor, so the red brick that you're seeing there at the ground, that's actually following the property line. The property line is actually on an angle. And so that's what that follows. And then the gray area in the middle is actually following just a 90-degree turn instead.
Okay.
Of the, so it's purely to create visual interest.
Okay.
At that level.
Okay.
To break up that.
That's all I wanted on that. Roberto, while I'm talking to you, you're the architects, you have the designs, you've made all these beautiful diagrams here, and I see a lot of white buildings in there showing the mass of all of the towers. What is it going to take for you to supply? All you have to do is push a button on AutoCAD to supply us with a SketchUp model so that we can look at the sun shadows ourselves instead of having you print out this so-called sun shadow study with half a dozen pictures and then spend 10 minutes describing it to us. Give us a SketchUp model of all of these things so that we can spin it around in 3D and see at any time of the day, any date in the calendar where the sun shadows fall. That's what I want.
Well, I take that, you know, if there's specific data we can provide, I know it's important for people to look at this. I think we've done a fairly extensive review of the shadows.
No, it's not sufficient. This is the year 2021, and we're past pictures, static pictures that you print out. This is the time for a 3D model that we can manipulate in 3D using the free SketchUp viewer, and we can see the shadows any date, any time of the day. It's dirt simple. You've got everything in your AutoCAD model. Everything is there. All you have to do is go File, Export, SketchUp, or something similar.
Yeah, no, the whole model has been done in SketchUp.
Well, then even easier. Give us a SketchUp model. Show us just the massing. I don't care if you fill in the fancy windows or the bricks or anything else. All I want to see is a rectangle, the way you've shown for the Fitzsimmons building and some of the Lakelander. All it has to do is be a rectangular block. And that's all I want to see. Distribute it. There's a free SketchUp viewer that anybody can download, and any 2-year-old can sit there on the computer and spin it around in 3D and see the shadows. That's what I want.
So that's a good suggestion. Roberto, is that possible? I mean, that'd be probably helpful.
Yeah, like we could certainly look at it. Obviously, we'll see how easy it is to provide it for a viewer. Like, it is a fairly heavy model, but we could certainly see if we could strip it down.
Okay, that'd be great.
Thank you for looking into that. So I have great concerns about this. I live in the Lakelander, and I understand that the developers and the architects and the planners are, their job is to look at what the city allows and push the limits and push it even past what's allowed, which is why we're having this rezoning now. And your job is to maximize everything. My job as a resident is to try to put some perspective on this and try to keep this area livable. I live here and I have to deal with this monstrosity, and it is a monstrosity. I'm going to have to deal with this, as are all the other people down in the Dow's Lake area and the Glebe Annex, etc., as well as the people who travel on Bronson and Carling, who walk, who bicycle. They're going to all have to deal with this monstrosity. And I don't see any reason why this zoning should be increased from the existing zoning of, what is it, 12 stories. That's a big problem. Now, you can say that this is arterial Main Street and they want high rises and everything else. There's a big difference between the high rises that are going in down on Le Breton Street and the Icon and whatever, and a high rise that's going in at this Carling and Bronson corner. This is looming over a residential area, a very nice residential area. All those other towers down in the valley near Dow's Lake, they're overlooking wide open park space and the lake. There's a big difference between putting 26 stories down there and 26 stories up here. And it just does not fit at this corner. My other point is, you said that in order to go to a high rise, you have to have 1,300 square meters footprint in, or larger to do that. Is that correct?
There are different minimum lot sizes recommended by the guidelines for interior lots or corner lots. Yes.
If you were not able to join these pieces of land into one single L-shaped area, would the current zoning allow you to go to 26 stories if you only have the parcel at the corner?
I haven't checked the size of that 770 itself, but I suspect not. No, I suspect it's too small.
Not. So the reason that you want to join these 3 or 2 properties, whatever it is, into one large L-shaped piece is so that you can build 26 stories. That's one of the driving points of merging, doing the rezoning and turning this into one piece of property. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think we also believe it will be a better project for the corner and for the properties as a whole.
Okay, all right. Thank you on that. And my last concern is about, as previous comments, about the traffic. This Carling and Bronson area, Carling Avenue, Bronson, is an absolute nightmare right now. It's dangerous for pedestrians. The traffic is absolutely, it never lets up going either way on both of those roads. It's terrible for pedestrians. And what you're going to do is you're going to introduce 26 stories of residential units. That's 174 cars in the parking garage, plus their guests, 25 spaces. And all this extra traffic is going to be spilling out into these 2 streets and trying to get in and out. Now, the people coming into Bronson from southbound are going to have to cross a lane of southbound traffic. That's going to be almost impossible. If you're coming from the north, entering in will be okay. If you're coming out on Bronson, you'll be able to go south with no problem. If you want to turn north, impossible to do. So you'll be going out the Cambridge Street exit. Now, you talked about some of the things that Cambridge Street exit is going to support. That's the place for the move-in, for the deliveries, but I think you've neglected the garbage. The garbage trucks are going in there as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what you've got is a significant amount of traffic coming out of the building and also going in, coming out of the garage and going in for moving and delivery and garbage out on Cambridge. And that is going to have a significant impact on the traffic flow through the Dow's Lake neighborhood. Because if you decide to come out of there and you want to go north on Bronson, you've got to come out of there and you've got to cross 2 or 3 lanes. If you want to go west on Carling, the only way to get west on Carling is to go through the Dow's Lake area, down to the lake, and along to the boathouse and out onto Carling. And I don't think anybody in the Dow's Lake area wants all that traffic winding their way through that neighborhood to get out of there. And that's a problem. And the only way you can do that is by contouring with a concrete berm or barrier for the traffic exiting, no left turn, and you have to go out onto Carling. If you make it one way, and this is up to the city, I understand that, but if you make it one way, then nobody else, the people who live in Dow's Lake now, who might want to turn in there and go to their homes, they won't be able to go through either. And the other issue is, if you say no left turn for the traffic coming out onto Cambridge and they have to turn right, just across the street, there's a laneway. And it might not take too much imagination to people saying, well, I can't turn left, but I can certainly scoot through that laneway to get onto the other roads that take me out to the Queen Elizabeth driveway. And that is a major concern, the traffic coming in and out of that building on Cambridge, and how it's going to be managed and how it's going to manage the traffic flow through the neighborhood. And that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Good comments about the traffic. I noticed very good comments about everything, actually. I noticed you mentioned the no right turns, I think Roberto or Paul, but the points remain about if you want to go certain directions, either on Bronson or Carling, that there is a concern that exists there. So can you respond on that piece? And I know you have I think you've got a traffic person here as well.
I'm here.
Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess I'll purchase it from a high level, irrespective of this site. Whether this was done, previous proposal or 3 separate parcels, you're going to run into these problems as well. So they're not a function of what's being proposed today. They're a function of where these parcels are located and the major function of Carling and Bronson have on the city's transportation network. So I think if you're going to look at it from an operational and safety perspective with the signals at Carling and Bronson, just from that singular viewpoint, you're going to try to push that access and all traffic to Cambridge. And what we've done, through the SAMCON, through the last iteration of this and the current one, is try to mitigate that and balance that solution to Cambridge and Bronson. We don't have any opportunity to connect to Carling, given the proximity of the signal. This one is pretty close and it is in the turn lane. So we acknowledge, and we're in the discussions with the city right now about how any of those left turn lanes are going to, or left turn movements either can be restricted or, mitigated on Bronson. And then another way of, once we decide on how this access is going to be provided, work on that Cambridge solution as best we can. And I think you highlighted a whole number of issues, and this goes back again the previous 2 or 3 iterations of this site, that anything that will stop traffic from going, south is going to be restricted to the residents. So you're going to catch 22 where, if it stops them or makes them comply, it's going to also have to make you comply. So, we're open to helping work through that with, we're going to do that with staff, but, further comments and solutions on that or ideas would be great. It's just, we're not quite through the details yet to give you a firm answer on how we're going to do that, because we don't even know how the accesses are going to ultimately operate until we get those final comments back from the city. I think there's one more question in there that I missed. If that's fine, that's good. But if you want to remind me, I can handle that one as well.
I'm not sure if you covered this one, but the through the community, if you're heading westbound on Carling, that was one that was a concern.
Yeah, we've heard that there's multiple iterations of a way you can filter through this community, and I think we've seen how access to Carling is being closed, over the many years, a little bit to the west of this of Cambridge. People, it's difficult to stop anybody from cutting through. I'm on Powell, so like my road's just a thoroughfare anyway. So I experience that daily, and I know the challenges in this area. Anything, even a small development is going to raise this cut through concern. I really want to focus on the Bronson access, but there's going to have to be something on Cambridge. But you can route through Dow's Lake, you could route down to Madawaska. There's a bunch of different ways to go through here. I know. Anything stopping people going through the community is going to stop you as well, and that's going to be the trade-off on how we do it at the end of the day.
Okay, lots more to come on that one. I think JB is next, I believe.
Hi, my name is Jean Beauregard. I live on Dawes Lake, and I've got a few points. I guess there's some that are maybe not part of this application itself, but part of the planning, the plan. When they talk about the node criteria, that allows to have high rises because it's a arterial node or whatever you call Carling. I think it's good to say, oh, we can have a few high rises here. But once we start putting them side by side, and there's going to be 30 of them between Westgate and Bronson, I think the arterial node concept is full and overflowing. I think that having a few high rises might be good. And like Jag said earlier about the one at the corner of Preston and Carling, facing wide areas, but it's bringing many units and many people. So as you add more people, you just feel that arterial thing that is not arterial anymore. It's going to be I'm francophone, so I don't know the word, but the word in English, but when your arteries are clogged by something, well, you die. That's what you're trying to do on Carling right now. There's going to be so many high rises. It's going to be like jam-packed, and people compete for the sky there. It doesn't make sense. When Mr. Hart was saying that the traffic is a problem, no matter what the application is, I think the traffic load added to the system is based on the number of units. So if you have less units, you have less traffic. So think about, and you were saying something about it's difficult in the area, it's a residential area, and we're trying to plug in all those big towers with many people. Think residential instead of thinking downtown core like Toronto or New York. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic going to the park. Everybody wants to use that green space. So if you go there all day long, I know I see the corner of Madawaska and not Madawaska, Kippewa Jackson going into the park. I see that from my house. You should see the traffic, pedestrian traffic going there across. If we have a lot of cars coming from that corner to zigzag around and access Bronson, Carling, it's going to be dangerous. It's going to be an accident waiting to happen. Everybody's there in the morning to go walk their dog. Everybody's there in the afternoon. Oh, gee, it's the same thing as rush hour. That's going to be risky. I'm going here from my list. One thing I have to say, I like the illustration of the building from the north side when you're facing kind of south. There was one slide, you don't have to get back to it, but my point is I like the cut of the building where it's far from the road, and I think it looks nice. But when I looked at it, and no personal attack here, I think the top tower looks like it was a piece of Lego added to it afterwards. So I think having something small makes sense. It always goes to the intensification. I'd like to know the number. I always said before in other presentation, if you have 2 units instead of 1, it's double the intensity. It's good. Does it have to be 2,000 times and really swamp us with a big mass of concrete? I don't know. And here I would like Mr. Architect, I can't remember your name. You say you live in the area, so maybe you use the same roads I'm using. I'd like to suggest a few things you could go see. Go see what they just did on Brookfield across the government buildings. I find that really nice. I think it's 9 stories. It's wide. It has commercial spaces as apartment buildings. It goes far in the back of the lot, but it's not an eyesore and it's not a tower, and it fits in a residential area. I can't remember the name of that area. So that's one thing I was suggesting. If you go in front of a Canadian Tire on Heron, they have a big lot and they have towers. I think it's 9 or 10 stories. And then they have an inside courtyard where you have more apartments, but they have a courtyard. It's not a big mass without having like a space in there. Another thing, the shadows. I find that really sad that it's going to create a shadow on the sports field at the Glebe Collegiate. Glebe Collegiate has been there before most of us were born. And now we're going to say the field where the kids play, they don't need sun, you know, like I think everybody needs some sun. And on a playing field that is used all the time, Monday to Sunday by everybody, I think it deserves to have some sun there. And going back to traffic, have you ever been on Cambridge trying to get out? I know I need to take my son to school in the morning. And I would say that over 50% of my commute is spent on Cambridge waiting for somebody nice enough to let me out. So, and I'm not talking about the intersection of Madawaska because I find that intersection really dangerous. Everybody running the red light on Bronson. So I think we need to think smaller, think beautiful. Instead of going with the mass numbers and the big profit, build something nice. Go see what there is on, Jag mentioned that before, the development on Queen Elizabeth on the north side of it. I think it's townhouses or whatever. Build something like that. You'll sell your units much more. You make them nice with an inside court where you put green stuff, and you don't have to go 9 stories, you go 4 stories, and you do something nice. I think nice is nicer, is better than a big number. And I'm going back to my last point, community. When you build like a residence with 500 units, people don't know each other, don't care about each other. Build townhouses where people have a piece of grass in front of their house and they have a reason to talk to their neighbor. And when they say the city, it's you, me, it's people, it's not buildings. Buildings, they can be destroyed, but people, they remain after. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Very well said. Are there anyone want to respond to that at this time? I think they're well put on their own, but you may want to respond. Okay.
No, I'm good. I've taken notes.
Okay. As have I. Thank you for that. I think Diane, you are up next.
Thank you, Sean, for calling this meeting. I feel as if I've been participating in these meetings for the last 50 years. I actually have. I'm glad that the sunshine was mentioned. It's really important that new development does not block the sunshine from people who have planted gardens for years. And I share Jean's concern, and I was going to raise the football field at Glebe Collegiate. It deserves sunshine all the time. For as much, we should never block the sunshine from the kids' playing field. So I'm totally in accord with what Jean said on that. Jag raised some very good questions about traffic, and I invite you all to consider this. There's a lot of condos, there's a lot of units being proposed between Carling and Bronson and Carling and Preston, including a new hospital. And the traffic is going to be a nightmare. A complete and absolute nightmare. There's going to be a protest on Bronson, at Carling and Preston on Friday from 3 to 6. I invite you to come. It is very, very important that we not allow overdevelopment of a very sensitive area. We've got the heritage community of the Dow's Lake community. It's a beautiful community. It deserves sunshine in all of its yards and on all of its gardens. We've got the Queen Juliana Park. I don't own a car, so I would like all future high rises to not have any parking spaces and not have any cars. Perhaps run little community shuttle buses to the local transit way. But I think unless we get out of this car culture, we're never going to solve the kinds of problems that we have every single day on Bronson Avenue. I can remember when I was president of the Glebe Community Association, there was a proposition to widen Bronson. And so I sang a version of pave downtown and make it a parking lot, pave paradise. And that is what we're doing. We cannot continue to build for the bloody car. And we can't continue to build high rises that block sunshine to communities. I urge you all to continue to speak up on this. We all vote. We vote for people who are in office for 4 years. Our counselors an exception, I have to say. Many of them don't care about input. And on the ladder of participation, some of them call consultations, but it's tokenism. They're not really listening. So Sean, once more, I'm going to thank you for being a counselor who listens and who takes it all in. And I'm damn glad you're on the planning committee now. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Only one of several votes on the planning committee. Still a long way to go there, but I appreciate those comments. You know, I met with the applicants separately to this, and I met with our city staff separate to this as well. So my hope here is that we do listen, we do find some more common ground on this, because I've been seeing too many applications where they come in, that's it, there's no negotiation, it's done. And that has to end in the city. We need to see negotiation, we need to see communities represented, and maybe we all take water in our wine, but that has to be the principle we abide by, that we're negotiating and it is not just a done deal. Secondary plans ignored, that has to stop in the city. So appreciate those comments very much. Carmen and Joe, you are up next. Nice to see you.
Thank you, likewise. And thank you, Councillor Menard. I definitely echo the comments that Diane just made about having this meeting and listening to the community. So thank you for that, and thank you to everyone. Everyone's made really wonderful points up to this point, and I'm sure we will hear more rather. I'd like to bring up a couple of points, and one of them has to do with traffic. And Sean, you wrote an excellent letter regarding the hospital, and I just like, again, to Diane's comment, I'd like to remind everyone that we're talking about the hospital. We're talking about the Sky development, 3 towers from 55 stories ranging down to 30. The Icon, the Soho Italia, the Canada Lands Company at Booth Street, the Canada Lands Company again at 291 and 299 Carling. You know, and now another 26 stories. We can expect a lot of traffic on Carling and Bronson. The hospital is predicting 10,000 staff, 10,000 ancillary jobs. I mean, this is good for the economy, of course. 1 million visitors. That's 2,740 extra cars per day. And what is the number one piece of advice from Ottawa Public Health when someone is sick? Do not use public transit. You know, so people will be using their cars, and with all that development, we can certainly expect a lot of traffic on Carling and Bronson. My comment is to Mr. Gauthier. In the past, when we met informally, you brought up that this corner was important. You described it as a cornerstone, a pierre angulaire, and we obviously have concerns in this neighborhood about the precedent that this building will set. And you indicated at the outset of the meeting that the city staff has yet to provide their input regarding this particular development. Mr. Black from FOTAN has indicated that there's not a significant concern about high rises at 270 and 280 because they are 2 separate properties. But if you allow 26 stories at Carling and Bronson, what will stop someone from purchasing both of those properties together? And with the precedent set at 26 stories, we can expect another development, another high-rise development at 270 and 280. Which brings me to another point, which is to say the nomenclature of buildings. You know, we have low-rise, 1 to 4 stories, a difference of 3 stories from high to low. Mid-rise, 5 to 9 stories. That is to say, a 4-story difference between low to high, and then 10 plus. So you're saying 10 plus is what you're looking for, but the difference in height from 10 plus is 20 stories, and it creates a huge differential in terms of what you can allow. And so my question to you, Mr. Gauthier, and certainly my hope is that the advice that the planning committee provides, the planning department, the staff provides to this proponent is that that they build something that integrates and fits in with the community. Thank you.
Good questions. Okay, there's several questions there. I wanted to start with Steve, if that's okay. Steve, Joseph had mentioned the previous application and your own discussion of this area, and I do want to do a walkabout with you and a few other community members here soon. I know people know it, but it would be good to go out again and take it with new eyes. So, Steve, did you want to respond to just the initial comments there?
Okay, well, yes, there's always the possibility for the properties to the west to be consolidated and for a high-rise proposal to be presented to the city. So that's a possibility. You were talking about quoting me about La Pierre Angulaire. So obviously the official plan has policies that allow for intensification. But when we look at proposed development where a difference in density is being proposed, we have to be careful on how it impacts the surrounding neighborhoods. I understand that we were looking earlier at an angular plane, but there's more than that. So like I said, we haven't taken any positions here. There has been previous proposal on the property for a higher density and more height than what's proposed by zoning. So what's permitted now on 774 is 12 stories, but prior to this rezoning, what was permitted was 9 stories. So I cannot really answer the question right now. We haven't, like I said, we're during the circulation period. I still need to go through a thorough analysis. I've heard what the UDRP commented on. I'm going to have to be working with the applicant on it. I heard about the I guess the increase of density, the increase in height, how massive the development is being proposed, the impact on Cambridge Street. That's certainly something that will have to be worked on. The impact on Cambridge. The tower, will it be reduced in height? Will it be relocated more towards the south? That's something that we'll be looking at. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question here, but it's very early in the process, and there's still a lot of discussion to have on this proposal.
I think that's helpful. Joe, I know there was a couple other pieces in there. I don't know if Roberto or Paul or others wanted to respond.
I heard mostly comments, and I've taken some notes on those comments. I don't, if there was something specific you wanted us to address, Joseph, maybe you can let us know. But we hear the comments for sure.
Well, we remain optimistic.
And Joe, thank you, and Carmen, for the comments that you did make about the development nearby. I used that exact language in the letter, so that was very, very helpful. And actually submitted full comments just recently on the Civic as well for the planning report that'll be going, and use those comments in there as well. Thank you for your vigilance there and your work in Dow's Lake.
Thank you, Sean.
Much appreciated.
You've been really wonderful to work with. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There is questions in the chat. So before I see, I think others are ready to go. Jason, and I think that's Adam there. But I just want, if I could just go to the chat questions for really quickly, and I'll ask a few quick ones if that's all right with everyone. Okay. Oh, June Krillman has a question here. Has Glebe Collegiate been consulted in terms of student pedestrian safety at the intersection, as well as the football field shielding? Just mentioned, I guess, some of that shading as well that's there. There are over 1,500 students there, and many of them use the Carling-Bronson intersection several times a day. Great comment from June, as always. So can you respond to that? Have you talked to Glebe Collegiate yet?
We haven't as a project team, though Steve may be able to confirm, but I suspect they were circulated the application, but no, we haven't had conversations directly with them. With regards to the intersection, Andrew can jump in, but I mean, intersection safety, be it for high school students or just the general public, is always a focus of the transportation study. And the reports that are prepared for the transportation side of things are fairly detailed in terms of assessing not only vehicular, but also all modes of transportation. So pedestrians, cyclists. And so that has been looked at for sure, and making sure that that intersection remains as safe as it can be for sure. I don't know, Andrew, if you have anything to add, but
I think we've noticed quite a bit of changes at that intersection, at least on like advanced pedestrian timing to get the pedestrians out there for enhanced safety, as well as a little bit of changes with the recent construction around Bronson to the north on the turn lane. So we're in a little bit of a flux. We got to wait for the comments to come back, but I would note that, you know, it's not obviously 0 is a better number. It's only been 2 pedestrian only. There has been 2 pedestrian incidents at that intersection, at least reported to the city of Ottawa in the last 5 years. So, you know, it is something that we're aware of, and we'll be waiting for those comments from the city. But I think it will be predominantly a city improvement that we'll be seeing, but we can see what we can do as part of this, our interface with that corner going forward.
Sorry, I lagged there a tiny little bit. I think the Bronson and Carling intersection, I think you're referring to, that is a very dangerous, not a pleasant intersection to cross as a pedestrian at all. And so I think a lot of people avoid that. With more pedestrians in the area, we're going to see more people having to cross there. We do work with city staff on this. Even the timing of the light signals is difficult. If you're living in Glebe Annex and you're trying to cross over to the northbound side, and those leftbound turning vehicles onto Bronson northbound, it is the timing has tried to be adjusted there, but even still, it's difficult to get fully across the intersection, and you have to watch. There's a bunch of problems with that intersection as well. It's a city issue as well as intermixing with what this development would bring in the area. So definitely recognized by us. We've been trying to work with city staff on that. A lot of these changes won't come till this street is fully updated, though, in the near future. So we're really looking forward to when that happens. Sorry to keep you waiting, Jason. You're up, and then I'll go back to a chat question, and then we'll go to the next speaker. Go ahead, Jason.
Great, thank you. Thank you for being here, for doing the presentations, and John for hosting. So, you know, I've lived in the neighborhood for a while. I actually owned a house on Bronson for a while. I went to Carleton for my undergrad, for my master's, and now I have kids. Obviously, I'm very concerned about, and I should say I'm fortunate enough to live in the Dow's Lake neighborhood. I would welcome some smart, reasoned development on Bronson. I think it's needed. I think we actually need to think about how we transition that neighborhood so that people can live there. We've heard about livable communities. But, you know, I see what we've been looking at today in this application, and it, you know, it just makes your heart sink. It's really disappointing to see that we're being asked, or the city, for whatever reasons, it's, you know, this giant tower with no benefit really to the community in terms of potential amenities or green space or any of those things. I mean, you can see you've made the minimal effort to have, you know, setbacks or trees or something, but really it's minimal. But, you know, I don't blame a developer whose business is just about making money, you know, to propose something like that. Where am I going with this? In the proposal, I guess, you know, when you talk about the justification for a project like this, right at the beginning, Paul, you mentioned how close it is to cycling and different transit corridors. And I just want to challenge that, because you mentioned O'Connor. I mean, I would not take my bike Bronson to O'Connor. Like, that's several blocks away. There is no cycling infrastructure that I'm aware of in that vicinity that would allow someone to easily bike from that location anywhere. So I challenge that. And then the other thing is, you know, you talked about your client and the fact that, you know, the building could be designed so that in the future we could have some sort of retail or commercial space on the main level, but that there's no way that could be justified today because there's nowhere to park and nobody would want to stop there. So there's apparent like kind of contradiction. You're saying this is a livable place, we can bike from here and we can get around, and this is why we would justify a building of such mass and that kind of density with really no consideration for the surrounding community. But at the same time, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I mistook this, you're saying there's no way that we could justify having retail or a coffee shop or something because nobody would want to stop there and it's a busy intersection. Like these two things to me are a contradiction, and I'm wondering if you could just help me understand that.
Yeah, for sure.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Councillor. So yeah, with regards to the cycling infrastructure, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't live near this neighborhood. I'm not fortunate enough to live that close to downtown. I hope someday I will get there. But for me, I guess the cycling infrastructure, it appears to be quite robust. So you have the canal, you have Glebe Avenue bike lanes, which provide east-west connections. You have the train pathway. I understand none of those are Bronson Avenue with cycling lanes. And as Councillor Menard has said, the hope is that at some point in the future, that will be the case on Bronson. It will be rebuilt and there will be cycling facilities on Bronson. I believe that's already proposed on Carling to hopefully improve the cycling infrastructure adjacent to the site in that location. So that's where my comments were coming from. I understand it can be better. Cycling infrastructure in Ottawa can be better in every neighborhood. There's always room for improvement for that. With regards to the retail, to have a successful retail, you need to be able to lease the space. And retail tenants are generally stuck in a former model of how people get to their store. So even in a downtown setting, retailers want to make sure that people can stop on their morning commute to pop in and grab a coffee. Whether that's right or wrong. Even on Elgin Street, the short-term surface parking, that's what retailers are looking for, and that's what makes it a viable space in their eyes. As Roberto mentioned, the intention here is that Kataza would operate a cafe within the building. We've seen that in a couple of other places where retail hasn't been successful right off the bat. Saint Laurent is an example, 460 Saint Laurent, where a Brazil building where Brazil actually operates a coffee shop within the building themselves. And so that can be open to the public, but it also serves the tenants of the building. And I mean, we've heard a lot about Bronson, it's not a comfortable streetscape. 100%, it's not a comfortable streetscape, but urban design and improving the streetscape through, build form that abuts the street, opportunities for active uses at grade and glazing abutting the street. Those are the things that over time, together with roadway improvements to the actual physical infrastructure of the roadway, is going to make it a better place for people to live, to walk, to cycle, and want to spend time. You think about Wellington Street or Bank Street, right? Like these are not comfortable places to drive. There's a lot of traffic. It's very slow to get across them, but there's a lot of activity, a lot of people walking on those streets, and they're successful, and the retail is successful because of that. So unfortunately, it's this this sort of balancing act between, yes, we don't want to make it comfortable for vehicles, but because we want it to become a slower street where it's more comfortable for people to walk and spend time on the sidewalks, because right now Bronson is not that. But at the same time, we have to take the steps to get there. It's not a magic bullet to suddenly resolve the whole Bronson corridor, right? And so this development, like Roberto mentioned, we're hoping to develop it with the opportunity that in the future, it could convert to retail and it could support that Main Street sort of transformation along Bronson into a more walkable and comfortable streetscape. And hopefully we would get to the point where retailers would want to take space in the building. They would be less concerned about parking. But unfortunately today, that's not the case.
So I appreciate that answer, and I think the key thing I pick up on is just balance, and I think this is what this application is completely lacking. And I get that it's a chicken and egg, and that someone has to develop, and then that's going to cause the street to these things have to go together. So I guess just as a follow-up comment, and this is really probably more directed at Steve and just and the city in general, is that and I know the city is us, so we have an active role in this, but we gotta get this right. We gotta look at all of these things together and figure it out. And we shouldn't be spending. I mean, we spend a couple evenings a week. The active members of our community fight. It feels like a fight, you know, with these kinds of developments. And I think, you know, it's just not the way things should be done. We need to look at these things in a global, local way, if you know what I'm trying to say, because this is not a healthy way to build a community.
Comments. Thank you for that. And I know we're 8:40 now. We got 20 minutes left before 9, and I'm okay to go a bit over that to get questions. I don't know if anyone else can stay or not, but I do want to get them moving here. Carling is supposed to have bike lanes on both sides, separated eventually. Bronson, they have not made that proposal yet, and that is a fight for us all the time. So we are fighting a lot, and that is one of the fights, and it is, you know, that's a difficult one because city staff do not want to do that. I did meet with the applicants and talked about retail on the bottom. I want to see retail there. To me, there needs to be more than, if we're going to start this transition, it's their choice, right? At the end of the day. But I mean, the city can mandate, okay, bylaw is we have retail on the bottom. So we can say what we want there, but they have to build it and have tenants and all that stuff. So it is something that is desirable. We did raise with the applicant as well. I take their point. Some of these roads are not redone yet, and they'd be kind of some of the first coming in for that. But given the amount of people that would be potentially coming here to live in the building itself, you need to provide those type of amenity spaces. So I appreciate those comments. And sorry, I think it's Monique. I wasn't sure if it was you or I think Adam is your partner, but Monique, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I'm not going to rehash because, as you mentioned, it's 8:45, and I know people have lives to get back to, but I do want to make a couple points that I don't think have been mentioned yet. In terms of Cambridge, so just for context very quickly, we live on that laneway that was referenced about an hour ago, and there are about half a dozen to a dozen houses that stretch along that laneway down to Charles Jackson Avenue. So the Cambridge Street exit is going to be our big bugaboo, I would say, in our specific area of the community. I think we're talking about hundreds of cars. I think that's been stated. That's based on what we're seeing right now in terms of this development, what we're looking at. And I think it's important to note that anybody who's ever done any kind of architectural rendering or city planning knows there's design and then there's practice. So I can see it happening, and I know from living in buildings like this before myself, there's a lineup underground. People are not going to wait to get out onto Bronson. They're going to divert onto Cambridge to get out perceptibly more quickly, they think, in the morning or in the evening. So I do think that if there's a lineup, we're going to see a lot more people, unless there's some way to prevent that from happening, a lot more people coming out of that exit than you anticipate in the current modeling. And some of the problems that we're going to encounter have already been, I think, pretty well sketched out. So I'm not going to go back into them, but I will add that in addition to the traffic, pedestrian traffic that we normally see in the neighborhood, we have students that are coming in by bus every day. They're walking up Carling, crossing bridge to get to that main intersection to access the Glebe Collegiate. So we're talking about hundreds of high school kids during rush hour. We're talking about 6 children under the age of 2.5 in that laneway, not to mention the adults. We want to live too. So it is very important that we consider the context of the community as it stands right now. And then of course the seniors residence that exists at the bottom of Cambridge Street. So I would just ask that those elements be considered. The cycling lane that was just mentioned also going on Carling would potentially cross Cambridge. So again, you're going to encounter a barrier there, cars trying to turn right up towards that main intersection. And the last thing I would say is you need to consider deliveries. You need to consider food delivery, Amazon delivery, Ubers. If you're going to have a ton of students living in this building, you're going to be dealing with a lot of Ubers, both on Cambridge as they're picking people up and dropping them off, and also on Bronson and Carling potentially as well. So I'll leave it at that. But I do think I would echo that we need to consider there may be no other solution other than to drastically reduce the number of proposed units and the density of this development. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Good comments. Do you want to respond to that, Paul, or anyone from the applicant team?
I mean, we've heard the comments about the traffic. We're still working through that with staff as they review the report, and we've heard the comments. We were conscious of the concerns ahead of this meeting, but we've heard that, and we will take that away and continue working on a solution for that. Yeah, we've heard the comments about the density too, so I guess we're taking that as well away with us as well.
Okay, I'm going to go to the chat really quickly, and then we'll keep on the hands up. So the proposed development is massive and dominates the lot. The tower specifically is very close to existing buildings and property lines. But if it were moved, it would move closer to low-rise homes along Cambridge. Could you explain how a high-rise fits on the site? And the follow-up is the planning rationale states there is sufficient separation to potential future high-rise uses. What is the separation provided for potential future towers adjacent to the site on Carling and on Bronson? And how close is the tower to the lot line on lots where future towers could be built?
So the tower itself is 6.8 meters from that westerly property line, so the 270 Carling, as proposed. And as noted, we're looking at looking if we can increase that a bit more than we have. We've already increased it, but we're looking to increase it a bit further. The only lots really that we're close enough to study in terms of potential for a tower are those 270 and 280 Carling, so the sort of the notch of the L-shaped lot. As noted, individually, they're not large enough to support. As noted, if they were consolidated, in our opinion, if we were designing the site, we would place the tower at the westerly end of that. So basically far away from our proposed tower. Obviously, they may choose not to do that if it was ever consolidated. But I just want to circle back to the policies, which don't allow a high-rise building on that property, on those two properties, even if they were consolidated. The policies of the official plan only permit a high-rise to be considered at the intersection. So basically on the 4 lots that front the intersection, they wouldn't permit a high-rise building on those lots because they aren't at the intersection. So I believe that answered this series of questions.
Thank you, Paul, for that. I believe that's Sheila, and then Christy is next. Sheila, go ahead.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you everyone for speaking. My points further build on what others have said. I live on the corner of 3rd and Bronson, and already it is dangerous. My crossing, I have to go up to the cross lights. We are inundated with traffic already. I guess I'm not understanding this building. The Glebe and the Glebe Annex and Dow's are all walkable neighborhoods, my understanding. And maybe I'm not quite getting this, but if we're building a high rise in walkable neighborhoods, I'm not getting how this is contributing to the community and the walkable neighborhood premise, because it seems to be a contradiction. Also building, you mentioned that there are bicycle parking in the building. How much? Like, in my opinion, it should be, if you're gonna have, it should at least be on par to what the car parking is, but it should actually be double what the car parking is, which takes me to the other point in building on Diane. I actually do not think, hands down, period, that there should be parking in this building at all. If we are talking about, we've had this conversation, others brought it up about changing after. I'm not understanding this. This is a backwards thought process. Change starts now. If you want to make change, do it. So build a building that has retail that is accessible, that all can access the community, the 3 communities that you're building this building into. Take off the high-rise part, take out the parking. Then we've alleviated all this discussion about the safe, not safe crossing at the intersections, which it is a nightmare. People need to, my feeling is, if you're going to live in the core, for the most part, outside of, if you own a home or whatnot, but like the new way of building, cities are for people, they are designed for people, and other people have said this, they are not for cars. This is last century thinking. So if you're going to start building in 2021, build a building, period, no car parking, plenty of bike parking. Every single unit should have bike parking. And we've just cut out half of the conversation. That's my take on this.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. So I'll get the applicant to respond. How much parking is proposed there now? And what do you have to respond to Sheila's other comments as well? Well taken comments.
So right now we have 174 total parking spots. So that includes the 152 resident and 22 for visitors. So that is the zoning requirement is 173. And obviously we could reduce that, but that the city's standard requirement is 173. So we're just over that requirement. In terms of bike parking, we're proposing just over 350 bike parking spots for the 328 units in both phases. So there is more than one space per unit, and there's significantly more bike parking than vehicular parking. So that's a consistent comment we get from communities and councillors, including Councillor Menard, about increasing bike parking within buildings. So we've made an effort to do that here. And that part of that is the request, as I noted, that we're requesting to permit stacked bike parking, which just makes bike parking more efficient. It's been in Europe for years, but we're finally adopting it here in Canada. So.
Okay, thank you for that. I think there is more there, I think, to have discussions on in terms of the parking. People often worry if you don't have parking in a building, well, people will just park on the street, and the streets will also be overloaded with parking. We don't tend to see that play out all the time. There is some of that may occur. Depends on your parking regulations in those streets as well. So there is. I think there's more to this. Anyway, I appreciate those comments. And if I could just before I go to Christy, could the developer please display the south elevation view? Someone is requesting that. None was provided earlier. The south elevation view at the top of a hill that slopes down towards Kippawa will also be massive. A 9-story uninterrupted mass with balconies, and that 9-story mass situated at the top of a slope will look even higher. So please, the self elevation view during this meeting. Can you get that up there, Paul?
Yeah, I'm just bringing it up.
Perfect, thank you. And while we're moving along here, okay, do you have like a real view instead of the?
Sorry, yeah, like a rendered view.
Yeah, rendered view. Sorry.
It may not be straight.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if we'd have a full one.
We need that 3D model for, right?
Sorry,
okay, I'll let you look through, Paul, and we'll go on to the next. So Christy, did you want to go ahead while Paul's checking out if they've got the slides? Just on mute there, Christy.
Oh, you're still on mute.
Or you're still on mute there.
Hi there. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm a planning lawyer, just out of full disclosure, and so I always come at this from sort of like a law and policy perspective. So, as a right, in light of the location of this site as you pointed out and we've discussed at the corner of Bronson and Carling, 9 stories is permitted. And you have noted that if certain criteria in the official plan are met, then you can exceed that 9-story height. So one of those criteria is having a community amenity. And I noted that in the rationale of the planning rationales provided that it states that a mid-block pedestrian connection is provided as a community amenity. However, I have sort of worked on a number of projects and proposals, and there's another recently approved proposal by the City of Ottawa that sort of springs to mind. It was also on Carling Avenue, a little bit further down, not at a corner. It involved an 18-story building. But at that site, the developer chose to leave sort of ample space. They included an on-site park. They included ample green space. There was a turning in and access point. Some of the loading and the parking was sort of dealt with on-site, and other factors like that. So there were these sort of amenities that were provided both for the residents of the building as well as the community at a whole. The entire community was invited to use this parkette that was developed. So I note that you own a large consolidate, not you own, but the developer owns a large consolidated, formerly 3 parcel development. But a choice has been made to sort of push that envelope, sort of facilitate a lot of mass, have setbacks that are on the small to minor side. And that's a choice that has been made. There could be a choice to include larger and more significant community amenities. So the question is really twofold on this point. It's sort of how can you talk to me about sort of how this mid-block connection is a community amenity? And I just note sort of in practice, these have been sort of developed in other parts of the city and have often been closed or privatized for security concerns due to sort of safety concerns from some of the people in the residents. They haven't necessarily proved to be all that conducive to community engagement. So I guess that's point number 1. And then point number 2, are there any other community amenities that are being provided? And 3, would you be interested in engaging in a dialogue as to what other possible uses could be desired and wanted by the community and incorporate those into the proposal? Because I would argue that the jump from 9 stories all the way up to 26 is fairly massive. And without sort of a provision of community amenities, the official plan requiring that, I question sort of how this all works from a policy perspective.
Okay, Paul?
Yeah, no, for sure. So yeah, definitely you're right, Christy. There's a requirement as part of those policies to provide a community amenity, and definitely that's something that we'd want to discuss, obviously, with the community to get a sense of what that amenity would be. That mid-block connection was intended as a way to promote pedestrian porosity between Bronson and the neighborhood. And it would be protected. The idea was that it would be protected through surface easements, as we've done in other projects throughout the court. That does ensure that they remain open, and they sets the parameters for how they're maintained to the city's standard. So that was the proposal there. Obviously, yes. So back to your original question, yes, we're open to a dialogue on what that community amenity looks like. And that is separate from Section 37, which is the other sort of amenity or community benefits charge. That's the new language. That's not what it's called officially yet, but that's what it will be called in the future. But that is, one of the things that we would negotiate down the road once we have come to this middle ground, like we're shooting for, is okay. What's the uplift, if any, resulting from the proposal, and then how does that money get spent within the community? So yes, definitely, there's lots of discussion on that to be had still, for sure.
A follow-up, Christy? Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm frozen or.
I think she may have frozen. Also.
Okay.
No.
Okay. We'll wait and see if Christy comes back. I know we're just at 9 o'clock now. There is a question here on the chat, and it says, would you build if limited to 12 stories? If the city said can't go above 12 stories, would you build?
Tanya, Roberto, I don't know.
Yeah, to me, that's certainly a question for the owner. Ultimately, they're the ones who have to look at the viability and feasibility of the project.
You want to answer if we could build a maximum of 12 stories?
Yes, if the city limited it to 12, as a previous proposal SAMCON had done, would you end up building there or not, is the question.
Well, we'll see what the city answers. It's, I can't answer what will happen in the future. I don't want to mislead you saying, yeah, for sure, I'm going to develop maybe I'll sell. We're not, like, for us, our intention is to make the community, like, maybe it's working with the community to see how we can make this project work. I think you said it well, that we have to work together. It's give and take. So we're looking forward to communicate and collaborate with you guys. It's not one-sided. We're hearing your comments, we're taking notes, and we'll regroup, maybe propose something new or is a different version of this, and see how we can work together.
Okay, thank you, Tanya. That's helpful. Christy, I think you lagged there a bit. Did you have more follow-up? I know you have a lot, I'm sure, but did you want to raise anything else at this time?
I just actually have one more point, if you can hear me. I was going to ask a follow-up question on that, but I actually have a slightly different question. So will you indulge me to answer ask that one? Yep. So this one's just sort of focusing back on the transit priority isolated measures situation. So I have a question both for the city and then one for the development team as well. So the term isolated measures is undefined in the official plan and the transportation management plan. But I know it is different from the other type of transit priority, which is a continuous measures kind of situation. So I'll ask the question fully now, and then I'll maybe ask the city and then the development team to answer. So the question to the city is really if you can describe the difference between transit priority continuous measures and intermittent isolated measures is point number one. And then the second follow-up question to that is, if this is sort of an isolated measures situation, would that not support a lower level of intensification rather than sort of intensification sort of right at the top of the high rise envelope? There's obviously a range of high rise developments, and one can choose to have a 10-story building, 12-story building, or a 26-story building. So I was hoping the city and the development team could speak to that.
Steve, did you want to address that?
Steve, do you want me to jump in and then you can correct me if I misquote something there? Or do you want to handle that?
Looks like Steve maybe.
I think Steve's frozen too. Yeah, that's such it's just a stare. But yeah. Yes, so Andrew, why don't you jump in for now?
Yes, so the transit priority can take a whole number of forms. It can be something as simple as a change to the signal timing, to putting a queue jump lane, changing the location of the bus stop from near side to far side of the intersection to a continuous bus lane. There's a whole continuum of what constitutes a transit priority. So that differentiation, you're right, is not illustrated in the transportation master plan, but it's also contextual to what the corridor needs to provide the level of service that OC Transpo wants and feels is needed on those corridors. Stop, amount of time stopped, how long it takes to get on and off at each spot, a whole bunch of those things, total ride time as well. So it's a pretty complex equation when you factor in all the interconnecting routes and how it all connects together. Does that kind of answer your question for what those isolated and continuous measures would be?
Well, my understanding was always that an isolated measure would sort of be, you'd have your bus in sort of the general traffic going down the street as we actually see on both Bronson and Carling, whereas a continuous measure would be sort of, a dedicated, lane or priority lane for buses and things of that nature.
Well, I'll point south on Bronson right now. When you come over the bridge, that's an isolated measure right there, where it has a little bus lane to get past the first signal, and then it merges back into general traffic. That's an isolated measure on a transit priority corridor right there.
Okay. I think Steve had to log off, and we are past 9 here, and we're stretching it a little bit. So I think we'll take maybe one or two more. I know James had his hand up for a little while here. Christy, did you have other pieces? I'm sorry, we gotta.
No, I think my only question, and I can leave it here, was just that if it's an isolated measure, does that perhaps suggest a lower level of intensification? But we can continue to have that conversation.
I'm happy to just quickly respond to that, Councillor. Just the official plan makes no distinction between transit priority corridors, be it isolated or continuous, just like it makes no distinction between a BRT station or an LRT station. It's just either rapid transit or transit priority.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we're at now James Kenny.
Thanks, Sean, and everyone. I think it's without question that the height and mass is an issue for everyone. Like, I think everyone's issues with this are all related to it being too high and too large. I live on Cambridge and also on the lane, and so I'm particularly worried about the exit and the one way, but the exit from the parking lot coming out onto Cambridge, obviously going down the lane and protecting the residents and families and everything. From a planning perspective, so like all the other buildings along Bronson, like they just have their one entrance and exit on Bronson. When this was being planned, was it ever considered to just adjust the footprint of the building to make more space so you could have a laneway or a bigger area where we could have everything be on Bronson and not into Cambridge and all the issues associated with that? I know with the size, there's tons of traffic issues and the like, but was that ever considered to adjust the footprint and make all the services and access be strictly on Bronson? Thank you.
Yeah, ideally that's where we want to be. It's the arterial road. We don't have to have an impact on the community. So that would generally, if we were a little bit south of this, that's probably how it would be proposed, because we can do that. The complication at this site is because it's at the corner, and there's conflicting, you might consider them conflicting policies where you can have potential higher density at this location and try to maximize your frontage on two arterial roads. But that signal, the proximity to that signal makes accesses particularly challenging. So I don't think if you're going to just look at General Transportation Association Canada guidelines, any access on the Bronson frontage doesn't meet the minimums for the offset from the intersection. So what we're proposing, any access on there to begin with, then we have to prove, and we have to, contrary to what we're doing here, we have to fight to actually do that and convince city staff that operates this road and has to assume that liability impact and safety concerns of being close to that intersection. We have to convince them to take that on. So a lot of these conversations around traffic are that give and take, that there are a lot of things we'd like to do, but we can't. And there's not a way that would be, might not be acceptable to the city or might not be acceptable to the operation of the site. So sorry, that's a little long-winded.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, James, for that question. Okay, who do I have next? Evro, I'm sorry, mispronouncing your name. You can go ahead. And Steve, you logged off when there was a question from Christy. I don't know if you heard the question or not, but there was a response by the applicant. I know we saw you froze there. Maybe we can email it to you separately.
Okay, I heard the question.
Okay. You want to say anything?
Okay. Well, I couldn't hear what the applicant replied, but I don't mean to repeat. So the question was about the intermittent measure for the transit priority corridor. So that means that it's not continuous on the corridor. And I understand that the question was that should there be less density on where there's intermittent measures? Did I understand the question correctly?
Yes, that was my question, that there should be something lower, closer to 9 versus 30 stories.
Well, the city would have to look at what's to be in front of the property and where it leads to. So I can't really answer that question. So it's not automatic that because it's an intermittent measures transit priority corridor that automatically the density should be lower. We should have to look closely at where are those measures in comparison to that property, and look at the bus routes on the corridor, and that's from where I guess the judgment would be made.
All right, that's helpful. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, and last speaker, Evro. Sorry, go ahead.
Are you referring to me?
I am. I'm sorry if I didn't get your name right.
Enrique.
I apologize.
Enrique.
Oh, Enrique. Okay.
I'm from 290 Powell. I'm sorry.
Okay. Nice to see you. Sorry.
So, but I think that a lot of areas have been covered. I just like to wrap up saying that this is a project that would simply kill a neighborhood without even trying, and there is no reason to even contemplate it. You know, anything over 6 to 8 floors is about the only thing that can sort of merge with what we have. I am at 290 Powell. We have 6 floors. And then, you know, further south on Bronson, there is a building, which I think is 8 floors or 9 floors. And, you know, anything over that is simply going to kill the flow of that whole neighborhood, but also attending to all the traffic problems, which would be just absolutely unlivable. It would kill the neighborhood, really. It's and I'm very concerned about my neighbors who are close to Commissioner's Park. I do take strolls all the time. I see, you know, the problems that they have when there are some events, you know, like Tulip Festival and things like that. You know, but they have the best of disposition, and you know, so far so good. But if we have 320 units there, people are going to start using that park, and the park already is showing signs of stress. The vegetation, the lawns, and so on and so forth. And this is a national treasure. We should not risk that either. But I think the issue of Cambridge Street seems to be a critical one. So either if you're going to permit any building, no matter what size, it should not have an exit or entrance from Cambridge. It should be all on Bronson, because otherwise it's just going to cause havoc there and going to destroy that neighborhood. Really.
Thank you for those comments. I appreciate everybody being here tonight. We did go over 15 minutes over. I'm mindful of people's time, and thank you to the residents who came and the applicant, as well as Steve from city staff. This is important to see. We are going to arrange, I think, a site visit, Steve, I hope soon. I just also wanted to say, I do think we should talk about the parking piece some more. I do wonder about that. I am going to raise that with staff. It was raised here about what would happen if you had no parking here. Would that mitigate some traffic issues anyway? What it would be the potential other effects, though, on the street and parking on the street. So I'm going to do some follow-up on that. We've taken detailed notes. This meeting was recorded, so we'll have the replay. And there's a lot more work to do here. Just based on your comments, this is not a done deal and needs to be worked through on many different aspects. So thank you very much for all these very, very cogent, coherent, and helpful comments. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you for being here. So have a great night, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.